Glad to meet you too.
Welcome, sir. Thank you, sir.
This is Subalal Jangu, the points man who was in touch with you all through.
Oh, okay. Nice to meet you.
Malayana is online, sir.
And our another colleague, Dr. Lalen Chunga, is online. Say hi. Lalen Chunga, say hi to sir. Lalen
Hello.
Chunga. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, just welcome. Welcome.
Shall we start, sir?
Yes.
Can I?
Can.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm privileged and I feel it an honor to welcome Mr. Arun Gandhi, the grandson of Mahatma. We have been very fortunate to be part of his lecture today or tonight, and we want him to share his thoughts on the great Mahatma. I request my colleague, Dr. Subalal Jangu, to have a very, very brief introduction about Mr. Arun Gandhi. Then after that, he will start his speech.
Welcome to all for today's webinar lecture about our hard-earned resource person, the speaker, the fifth grandson, Dr. Arun Gandhi. Today is with us. What about him to say in some words? I think the time is not so suitable and also short. So Arun Gandhi is a fifth number of a grandson of Mahatma Gandhi. His father is Manilal Gandhi, second son of Mahatma Gandhi. Dr. Arun Gandhi, he born in April. He was born in April 1934 in Durban, South Africa. And he, from the birth, as the childhood, he faced the racial discrimination in South Africa, and then the time, and his parents, as they were in South Africa, Durban, and they thought that it is a right time to send our son, and they took Arun Gandhi to India with the nurturing and helping to his grandfather Mahatma Gandhi in 1946. So as Arun Gandhi came India first time, not only to meet his grandfather, but also to help to associate as his grandfather's Mahatma Gandhi's his political and the national movements activities. He lived with the Mahatma Gandhi for 2 years at Sevagram Ashram. And that these 2 years for him as a life turning, and he was full with the anger or energy, but he was not to disseminate, to use the energy, the anger. It is his grandfather Mahatma Gandhi. He converted, he transformed the anger, the energy in Arun Gandhi into a transformative and a change. And he learned that we have to ready for change. So the Arun Gandhi's anger converted into peace. Now we see that the Arun Gandhi today with us, he is not a as American citizen, but he's a global peace ambassador. Today he is with us, a global peace ambassador, as a Gandhian friend. The ideology, the philosophy, values, he is a friend. And he's a cultivator of peace. His entire life is devoted and still working to promote peace, to cultivate peace across the world. He was in India till 1987. He worked as, at the Times of India. He spent his 30 years at the Times of India as he retired as a deputy editor, and he left India in 1987 with his wife Sundanna, and yeah, and in 1991 he established his Gandhian principle-based institutes and centers. He was one of a founder, or we can say as also the Parliament of World Religions. He was one of a as founder of a World Parliament of World Religion. Actually, in 100 years back, in 1893, the Parliament of World Religion in Chicago, but after 100 years, it's the first centenary celebration. The work done by Arun Gandhi is recommendable and also as a kind of pioneer. So that way we say 1993, as in US, he established a center, or as also as we can say Mahatma Gandhi as Institute for Nonviolence, and that institute is as a kind of a nursery for the giving the training, the idea as a schooling to the love and peacemaker people across the world, especially in US. In 1997, he involved as in many other activities, and he established as a very important institute center as a Gandhi Worldwide Education Institute in 21st century. And also we see as in 1970s decade, when he was in India, he established a center for social change. That was a kind of his first as a working for the Indian, especially for as those people facing the various type of the social discrimination. And for them, as Arun Gandhi, he thought that social change, there should be a kind of a mission, and established the Center for Social Change in India. And he's also one of trustees of a Interfaith World or Interfaith Association Alliance across the world. We see the very prominent as people as a member of or trustee and also collaborator of the Interfaith World. He also was one of a as leader and the Interfaith March as a movement for the as people's awareness about Mahatma Gandhi's principle, Interfaith March. Then after we see, he also launched a as movement also in South Africa, Satyagraha movement as a legacy. And he recently in India, January, February months, especially in January, the 3 weeks, he was in India with his the son Tushar Gandhi. Both they smart lead a kind of a legacy of Mahatma Gandhi march in India, and they visited around 1 dozen cities. And that we say as Arun Gandhi's as the contribution, and also we see as how the Arun Gandhi is promoting the Gandhian principle, Gandhian philosophy, the peace and non-violence. About his work, as he wrote many books, but very important 5 books that and why the importance of these 5 books, especially the 2 books is related to the children. Really we see that as like Arun Gandhi, like as we see that book for the children, for the value, imparting the value, philosophy, principles in the young generation as the Gandhian principle. So we see that his book as a kind of as gift of anger. What he experienced is when he was at Sevagram with Mahatma Gandhi, he wrote the first book as a gift of anger. As Mahatma Gandhi, as he changed the Arun Gandhi, his anger into the peace and love and satyagraha and non-violence. That's all he understood as a Gandhi's teaching as a gift of anger for him. And he was ready to change, and that's how he again wrote a book as a Be the Change. We should change. So his book as a Be the Change for the young generation, because the young generation can bring the change. And another, the grandfather Gandhi, he wrote the book 3rd number, and this book he is giving emphasis upon the Gandhian principle, philosophy and values for the young generation, is because the young generation is the future of the world, and that's so the peace and non-violence and the satyagraha and the truth depend the young generation, their energy. And he also wrote a very interesting piece of work, Legacy of Love, from his education of path of non-violence. So the legacy of love, that he having legacy of and the Mahatma Gandhi, the love for the nation, love for the poor, downtrodden citizen. And the last book is his grandmother Kasturba, a life. So these 5 very prominent work, and these first 2 for the young generation. So now these kind of his activities, works, and as he also addressed the United Nations General Assembly as a forum on peace, culture of peace. The forum on culture of peace he addressed in 2015, United Nations General Assembly. And the same year he addressed the United Nations Economic and Social Council as, and this the United Nations Social and Economic Council adopted, accepted the Arun Gandhi's institute, the worldwide Gandhi Worldwide Education Institute. So the Education Institute of Arun Gandhi is as a collaboration with the United Nations Economic and Social Council. So to promote the Gandhian education, Gandhian principle and as philosophy. So this very short kind of introduction about our speaker, Arun Gandhi. I stop here. I hope that this session will be very successful with the interaction also. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jangu. You have given a very good and very exhaustive introduction of the speaker. Now I request the honorable speaker, Mr. Arun Gandhi, to deliver his speech. Mr. Arun Gandhi, please.
Thank you very much. I say good morning from here because it's my morning. For you, it's the evening there. So
Sir.
Good evening and good morning. It's a wonderful introduction, and thank you very much for all the praise that you have showered on me. I don't know whether I deserve all that. but I was very fortunate in having had 2 years with Bapuji between 1945 and 1947, when I was from 12 to 14 years old. And some of the things that he taught me were very simple lessons, everyday lessons, but with a profound meaning. I must confess that I didn't understand the importance of the meaning of those lessons at that time. It only dawned on me after I grew up and began to reflect on what he said and what he made me do. And I realized how important they were and how life-changing they were. And so I've been trying since then to live accordingly. I remember the first time I was 12 years old, and I was coming back from my tuitions, and I had a little pencil about 3 inches long, and I threw the pencil away because I thought I deserved a better pencil. This was too small for me to use. And that evening when I met Bapuji and asked him for a new pencil, instead of giving me a new pencil, he subjected me to a lot of questions. He wanted to know how the pencil became small and where did I throw it away and why did I throw it away. And he made a big fuss over it, and then finally told me to go out and look for it. And I couldn't understand why he was making such a fuss over a little pencil. And I was surprised. So I said, "Are you joking with me? Do you really want me to go and look for a pencil in the dark?" It was already evening and it was getting dark. And he said, "Oh, yes, I do. Here is a flashlight. Take this flashlight and go out and look for the pencil and bring it to me." So I think I spent about 2 hours searching for that pencil. And when I finally found it and brought it to him, he said, "Now I want you to sit here and learn 2 very important lessons. The first lesson is that even in the making of a simple thing like a pencil, we use a lot of the world's natural resources. And when we throw them away, we are throwing away the world's natural resources, and that is violence against nature. And the second lesson is that because in an affluent society we can afford to buy all these things in bulk, we overconsume the resources of the world. And because we overconsume them, we are depriving people elsewhere of these resources, and they have to live in poverty, and that is violence against humanity. And that was the first time I realized that all of these things that we do every day, consciously and unconsciously, things that we overconsume and throw away and destroy because we have so much of it and we can afford to do that, that all of that is violence in some form or the other. And then to drive home this lesson to me, he made me draw a genealogical tree of violence. Just as we do a family tree with violence as the grandparent and physical violence and passive violence as the 2 branches. And every day before I went to bed, I had to analyze and examine everything that happened to me during the day. Things that I may have done to other people or people may have done to me, or things that I may have read about. All of that had to be analyzed and put on that tree. Physical violence is something that we are very conscious about because that is the kind of violence that hurts us, and we see it all the time. It's bloody and messy. But passive violence is something that we either ignore or we don't even know about it. That many things that we do without realizing that that is violence. And that, to find out whether this is passive violence or physical violence, I had to ask myself the simple question: if somebody were to do this to me, would I be hurt by it or would I be helped by it? If I came to the conclusion that it would hurt me, then that would be passive violence. So it was a kind of introspection. He was trying to make me realize my own weaknesses, things that I was doing which were not good. And it's only when you realize what your weaknesses are that you can change those weaknesses. If you don't realize them, if you don't know them, you can ignore them and you can live with those weaknesses without making any changes. And that is what philosophers call an unexamined life. An unexamined life is not worth living. We have to examine our life. We have to be conscious of our weaknesses and transform those weaknesses into strength. So that was the exercise that he made me draw. And when I began to do this exercise, within a few months, I filled up a whole wall in my room with acts of passive violence. The physical violence didn't grow very much because there's a limit to what you can do physically to hurt people. But passive violence grew endlessly. And then he explained to me the connection between the two. He said, we commit passive violence all the time, every day, consciously and unconsciously. And that generates anger in the victim. And the victim then resorts to physical violence to get justice. So it is passive violence that fuels the fire of physical violence. So logically, if we want to put out that fire of physical violence, we have to cut off the fuel supply. And since the fuel supply comes from each one of us, we have to become the change we wish to see in the world. So we have to do this introspection ourselves. And I recommend this individually to anybody who wants to do it, or as a class project, or as a group project, whatever you want to do, a family project. But do this exercise because it is a very important way of finding out our own weaknesses and finding out how we are contributing to violence. It is this kind of violence that continues in our societies that has caused a whole culture of violence, a culture of violence that has now seeped so deeply in every human being that it has overtaken everything. We find violence in religion, we find violence in politics, we find violence in economics, we find violence in our relationships, we find violence everywhere. Our sports has become violent, our entertainment has become violent. Everything about us has become violent. Even our speech has become violent. And our parenting has become violent. Now, with this pervasive violence in society, if we are trying to create peace in society, we will never be able to achieve it if we are living in the midst of all that violence. I know a lot of people tell me that violence is human nature, that we can't do anything about it. We are born with violence. We are not born with violence. We are born with love and understanding and respect as children. Violence is introduced to us. And how is violence introduced to us as children? It's the way we parent our children. When children misbehave, we use our authority to punish them. We tell them that if they don't behave, they're going to be punished. And sometimes we even punish them for it. Now that is the first seeds of violence we are planting in the minds of children. And they get the lesson that if somebody is not behaving, they need to be punished. So our criminal justice system is based on punishment. The punishment is not justice. Punishment is revenge. So we don't have justice in our system. We have revenge. And revenge doesn't get anything at all. Revenge is, it just increases and multiplies violence in society. So we have to become conscious of this violence that we are committing, the passive violence and the physical violence, and change that whole culture of violence to a culture of non-violence. That is what Bapuji's attempt was all through his life. He was making us, try to make us understand the importance of nonviolence as a way of life, not as a tool for conflict resolution, but as a way of life. Unfortunately, we have used it as a tool. Wherever possible, we just use nonviolence as a tool to resolve the conflict or put pressure on some authorities that we don't agree with. And that doesn't really help anybody. If we use a weapon without understanding it, we don't get the results that we expect. So it is very important for us to understand what did he really mean by nonviolence. Perhaps the term nonviolence itself is not appropriate to understand his philosophy, but unfortunately, there isn't any other term that I can come up with except satyagraha, as Bapuji talked about. And satyagraha means insisting on the truth. And that also sometimes leads us into several problems, because truth for one person is not truth for another person. Truth appears differently to different people. It needs to have real commitment and understanding for us to reach the absolute truth. And for that, we have to be sometimes willing to make the sacrifice that we are called upon to make. And we often don't do that because we want a truth that is convenient to us. And a truth that is convenient to us is a truth that is not convenient to everybody else. So it's very difficult to determine whose truths are we talking about. I encounter this here in the US very much because it's a very Christian-dominated society. And they are always talking about Christian truth and Hindu truth and Muslim truth. And there isn't any such truth. Truth is universal. There is no such thing as Christian truth is different from Muslim truth or Hindu truth. Truth is truth. And we have to accept that truth as a universal thing. But out of that lesson of nonviolence that he taught me, emerged the lesson for anger. Now today, unfortunately, we accept anger and we don't teach anybody about it. We don't talk about it. We allow children to find their own way of dealing with anger. And the result is that we all end up abusing anger. Now, anger is not bad. Anger is not evil. What is evil is the way we use it, the way we abuse it. Anger is something very powerful and very good. It is, using the analogy of electricity, it is to human beings what the circuit breaker is in the electrical circuit. If we didn't have a circuit breaker there and something went wrong, the electricity could cause a lot of damage. But because we have that circuit breaker in electrical circuit, we can, the circuit breaks and the electricity goes off, and then we know that something is wrong and we need to look at it. So in the same way, anger to human beings is that kind of a circuit breaker that is telling us there is something wrong and we need to stop and look at that and fix it. And that would be the appropriate way of dealing with anger. He taught me that I should write an anger journal. He said every time you get angry, don't act on it, don't say anything or do anything that will change the course of your life. But write it down in the journal. But write the journal with the intention of finding a solution to the problem, and then commit yourself to finding a solution. Now that is very important, because a lot of people tell me they have been writing an anger journal for a long time, but it hasn't really helped them, because every time they go back and read the journal, they are just reminded of the anger and they get angry all over again. So we don't want to get angry all over again. We want to be able to find a solution to the issue that caused the anger and fix that so that we don't keep getting angry over it. And I did this for many years, and I must say it helped me considerably in understanding my anger and being able to channel that energy into constructive action rather than abusing it and causing death and destruction. For many years now, I have been working in the prison system in New York State. I go to the prisons and I teach the prisoners about nonviolence and about anger and so on. And I am always amazed at how many young people in a moment of madness did something that has changed their lives completely. The prisons are full of young people who've been languishing there because they did something at that one critical moment, and that changed their life completely. And it's a very good example of what we continuously do all the time. Sometimes it makes a radical change in our lives, and sometimes it's not that radical, and fortunately we still continue to live happily with people. But it's very important for us to understand anger and to be able to use that energy constructively. And I am one of those who advocates that anger should be a lesson in schools, right from the elementary school all the way up to university level, that we have to use this compulsory subject to understand that emotion and be able to channel that energy constructively. I think when, one can go on speaking on this subject endlessly, but what we see today in the world, there's so much violence going on everywhere, every country, every um, state in the world. There's violence, there's hate, and there's prejudice, and it doesn't have to be that way. We should learn to live with each other with love and respect and understanding rather than destroying each other. And at the root of this whole problem of violence is the materialistic lifestyle that we have chosen. It's that materialism that has made us greedy, and greed has made us selfish. And we live a very selfish, very greedy life. We are constantly thinking of how to get the biggest share of the pie for ourselves and not worry about other people. And so we see at individual level, we are exploiting each other for our own individual gratification. At the national level, we see countries exploiting each other so that they can get the resources they need for their development. So the whole lifestyle is dependent on exploitation. We are constantly exploiting somebody or the other or something or the other for our own personal gratification. And that is where all the conflicts begin. And, we need to understand that we are not individuals. We are not isolated individuals who can just think about our own welfare and be content with it, and that we will live if everybody else perishes. We are all interconnected and interrelated and interlinked, and not only as human beings, but with nature and with all of creation. And we have to understand that and work so that we can build a whole nation or a creation or a world that lives in harmony with each other. If there's no harmony, there's no peace. We have to create that harmony in ourselves by reaching out to each other and living with each other happily. And that is what Bapuji taught us. He always emphasized that we should not get into politics and seek power, that we should devote our lives to serving the poor people and the people in general, and taking his message as far and wide as possible. And so up to my generation, we have continued with that tradition. Many people keep asking me why this Gandhi family has not come out in politics. And it was because Bapuji didn't want us to get into politics. He wanted us to serve the people. And that is what we are doing there. And I hope that this little sharing of some of the lessons and things that I understood from Bapuji will help you in understanding your own life and your own responsibilities, and that it will make a difference in your life, and you will devote your life to creating that harmony and peace beginning in our homes. If we don't have harmony and peace in our homes, we won't have it in our societies. And we won't, if it's not there in society, we won't have it in our country. So it has to begin with the individual. We have to learn to create that peace and harmony within ourselves if we want to create it within our families. And that is how it multiplies and grows. So I'm hoping that these few seeds that I have planted in your minds, you'll give serious thought to it and learn from it and make a difference in your life as well as in the rest of the world. So I call myself a peace farmer. I go and plant seeds in the minds of people and hope and pray that they will germinate and we will have a good crop of peacemakers. So I'm looking forward to the time when all of you young people who are listening to me will become peacemakers and make a change in this world. The way we are going right now within the world, we are going towards self-destruction. It's taking us to more and more violence, and that means we will eventually perish and civilization will be destroyed. But we can make a difference. If you turn things around, we can save this world and we can save ourselves, and future generations will commend us for the foresight and the actions that we have taken to make that difference so that they can enjoy a better world. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And if you have any questions, I think we might be able to answer some of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. It's really an enlightening and insightful presentation, and rather I would say it is a discourse. And we are really fortunate to listen from you, a peace farmer who can plant the seeds in the minds of the young people. Just right now, I would like to take a couple of questions which were posted. One of the interesting questions that I came across was, how many was Mahatma Gandhi's idea successful in his lifetime? Do you think Mahatma Gandhi's idea helped in making new India? Professor Grandhu Sekhar Chanda from Bangladesh. Sir,
no, I don't think we really understood his philosophy or all his work. We paid lip service during his lifetime. We used nonviolence to get independence for the country. We didn't really understand the philosophy properly. And the result is that after his assassination, we have distorted his philosophy. We look at nonviolence only as not using physical force. We think that as long as we are not fighting physically with each other, that we are nonviolent. But we have a lot of anger and hate and prejudice in our being. And that is not what he wanted. He wanted us to look at nonviolence in its totality, the physical part of it and the passive part of it. And we have to get rid of all of that violence from our beings, not just the physical part. So I don't think that India today is really at the official level. They are not practicing Gandhi's nonviolence at all. But at the grassroots level, there are lots of people, individuals, some of whom who were not even born during grandfather's lifetime, but they read about him and they read his philosophy and were very impressed by it, and they've devoted their lives to making a change in society. So there are thousands of little groups everywhere, and I'm sure even in Mizoram, where people are doing something to help the poor and help the oppressed people to come up and enjoy a better life. And that is what is more encouraging.
There is another question from Biswajit Mahapatra. What reasons will you attribute for lack of enough inspiration for following Gandhian lifestyles in today's India?
Because we were not sincere. We were not really sincere in trying to learn about his philosophy. We just used it because it was convenient to get what we wanted. And you don't learn anything from that kind of an attitude. To learn something, you have to be sincere, you have to be humble, you have to have an open mind. You know, this is another thing that grandfather used to always tell us, that your mind should be like a room with many open windows. Let the breeze flow in from all the windows, but refuse to be blown away by any one of them. Now, today we don't have that kind of an open mind. We have very closed minds, and we learn only what we want to, and we learn only what can make us a lot of money. I hear of young people going into universities and colleges, and the only thing they want to know is show us a profession that is going to make us a lot of money. So and then they go into that profession and learn what is necessary so that they can come out and make a lot of money. Life is not about just making money. You can have millions of dollars or rupees and not have happiness and not have fulfillment. So life is much more than just making money. It's we have to get rid of that materialistic thinking and become more open and willing to accept differences and accept diversity.
There is another question from Dr. K. Bhanu Prakash. How do peacemakers and keepers deal with oppressive and depressive sections of society?
Well, it is because of the oppressive and depressive sections of society that one becomes a peacemaker. We want to get rid of that. We want to change that. We have to work towards it. You know, if there is peace and goodwill all over the world, then there is no need for a peacemaker. The peacemakers are, like I said, peacemakers also have limitations. I mean, none of us have the ability to change the whole world. I can't do it. I've been working on it for the last 35 years, but I sometimes feel that I have not made any difference. But then I see individuals who have heard my lesson or who have listened to Gandhi and who have read his books and have been impressed by it and changed their lives. So I realize that even if I don't have the ability to change the whole world, I do have the ability to change one person. And that is fine. Every time I go and speak to a group of people, if one person there is affected and begins to think about what I said, that is very good for me. I am happy. It's only when I have that, expectation that I want to influence everybody and change everybody overnight, then I will be disappointed because I don't have the capacity to do that. So disappointment comes in when we have very high expectations. Our expectation should be attainable, not astronomical.
So, can we have a couple of more questions? One
Yeah.
question is, how can we apply our anger to love to create a better world?
We have to, first of all, learn to understand anger. What is anger? Why do we get angry? And then we have to address the issues that bring us anger. Now, today, the issue that brings me a lot of anger is the violence that I see, the senseless violence that goes on everywhere. And so I have devoted my life to making people understand that this kind of life or violence is not worth living. We have to live in harmony. We have to live with love and understanding and acceptance of each other. And that is how we can create harmony. So we have to look at issues and try to tackle the issues as best we can. Again, I must emphasize that we have to limit our expectations. Don't have very high expectations. Don't think that you can change everybody you come in touch with, but just be thankful that you have the opportunity to plant a seed or to help a little bit somewhere, and that will multiply and eventually grow.
Sir, the last question. The question is, how are you going to handle the present difficult times in the face of this pandemic? What would have been Mahatma's stand on this occasion?
Well, Mahatma would have told us that much of this pandemic is because of our own abuse of the earth and the nature and all of that. And we are paying the price for that now. And we have to change our life. We can't go back to the same normal. If we go back to the same normal, we are going to be going down the road of destruction. So while we are dealing with the immediate results of the people who are getting sick and dying, we have to try to nurse them and help them overcome their illness. Bapuji did this when during his lifetime, when he met with the plague and in South Africa as well as in India. He got down and he started working and cleaning up and helping the people affected by plague. But at the same time, he was teaching them the value of cleanliness, that plagues come about because we are unclean in our habits, that our surroundings are all, dirty. And unless we live a clean life when we can clean up everything, we are going to have more and more plagues. So he worked both immediately to help the people who were ill, and also long-term to help teach them a better lifestyle. And that is what we need to do in this pandemic. I hear people always talking about going back to normal. We can't go back to normal. Going back to normal means that we will go on the same path of destruction that has brought us to this level. We have to find a new normal. We have to find and do some examination of how our lifestyle has been abusing nature and abusing the earth and abusing all the resources and correct that so that we can find a new normal and live a better lifestyle.
Oh, that has been wonderful, sir. It's really enlightening. and quite insightful. And now I request my colleague, Dr. Lalian Chunga, Associate Professor, Department of Political Science, to propose a formal vote of thanks, sir. Dr.
Thank
Lalian
you.
Chunga. Yes.
Thank you, respected Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor J.K. Panaik. We are coming to the end of this interesting webinar. The organizers, the conveners, we have so many things to be thankful for. First of all, we'd like to thank our respected and humble speaker, Sri Arun Gandhi, the fifth grandson of the great Mahatma Gandhi. Although Mizoram University is located in Mizoram, which is in the northeastern region of India, class 4 school children knows who Mahatma Gandhi was. His name is very, very popular among school children here in Mizoram. That's why we are very proud to have his great-grandson, Arun Gandhi, as the messenger of the Gandhian philosophy and Gandhian thought in this age of selfishness. Secondly, our sincere thanks to our respected Vice Chancellor for his philosophical guidance and his untiring encouragement and fatherly attitude to the conveners and the organizers. For me personally, the Vice Chancellor is a blessing to me. And thirdly, our respected Pro Vice Chancellor for his guidance and academic leadership. And fourthly, last but not the least, we, the organizers, are most grateful to you, all the participants, for making this webinar a grand success. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Arun Gandhi.
Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you very much. Namaste, sir. Thank you very much. Thanks all.
End for all. End for all.